Okay, I call the meeting to order. Please rise for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Welcome everybody here this evening and those that are watching. And for those that are watching and here today, that if you've suffered damage in this latest storm, the state has declared an emergency, and the town has, and there'll be information on the town website tomorrow morning regarding how to file a claim. Okay, first item on our agenda is, we're using a revised agenda, by the way. Seasonal licenses. Mr. Yule.
Mr. Chairman, I move to renew the transient vendor license for the sale of flowers, Christmas trees, etc. at 226 Main Street for Robert Connors, 58 Wyman Street, Woburn, Massachusetts, to expire December 31, 2010, subject to all regulatory department requirements.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Yule, second by Mr. O'Leary. Discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous. Next, Hillview Snacks. Mr. Yule.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I move to renew the common victualler license for GFM Hillview Snacks, 149 North Street, to expire December 31, 2010, subject to all regulatory department requirements.
There's GFMI Snacks.
GFMI snack, Hillview Snacks.
Jeff doesn't have his
GF,
glasses.
oh, that little eye, they stuck an eye in there?
What about my glasses here? Let's second that.
Motion by Mr. Yule, second by Mr. O'Leary. Discussion. Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous.
We need to get Reader's Digest large print version for you.
Mr. Yule. Thompson Club.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I move to renew the seasonal wine and malt beverage club license for the Thompson Club, Inc., DBA Pro Shop, 2 Mid-Iron Drive, to expire December 31, 2010, subject to all regulatory department requirements.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Yule, second by Mr. O'Leary. Discussion. Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous. One more. ABCC forms. Mr. Yule. No, the next is appointments. Oh,
Is
there's
it the
two, there's two regarding it. Right, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry?
There's two.
Is
There's
it
the
the,
forms and then
ABCC?
Yeah.
ABC.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, I move to sign the ABCC 2010 seasonal renewal.
motion by Mr. Yule, second by Mr. O'Leary. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous? There's one more, Jeff.
Mr. Chairman, I move to sign the ABCC 2010 seasonal estimate form.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Yule, second by Mr. O'Leary. Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous. Okay, next item on our agenda is a public hearing for the transfer of package store wine and malt beverage license Tedeschi 202 North Street. And I'll read the notice of the public hearing. In accordance with Chapter 138 of the Massachusetts General Laws, a public hearing will be held by the Board of Selectmen in Room 14, Town Hall, 235 North Street, on Tuesday, March 30th, 2010, at 7:05 p.m. on the application of Pendleton Ventures, Inc., DBA Tedeschi Food Shops, for the transfer of the package store wine and malt beverage license from Paul Avaganios, DBA Tedeschi Food Shops, Shauna Pendleton, manager, license to be exercised at 202 North Street, North Reading, Massachusetts, in a one-story building, no cellar, one back room for storage, and 2 lavatories. I will open the public hearing. We have representatives from
evening, members of the board. My name's Greg Donahue. I'm representing Shauna and Chris Pendleton, the sole shareholders of Pendleton Ventures, Inc. They are requesting your permission to transfer a license from Paul Avejanos. It's a wine and malt beverage package store license that was formerly exercised at 202 North Street in North Reading. I believe that the license was exercised at that location for approximately 23 years. That's a rough estimate. Shauna and Chris are husband and wife. They've been married for 8 years. They have 2 young children. In July of 2002, Chris became a franchisee of Tedeschi Food Shops in Hudson. Around that same time, he applied for and received a beer and wine package store license at that location, where he's exercised it successfully to the current day. Chris is tips trained, as is Shauna. It's largely a family business. The couple works together and are very familiar with the safety requirements for the appropriate exercise of such a license. Sean is also tips trained. The request is for a transfer of the license to a holding corporation, Pendleton Ventures, Inc. Chris and Shauna will be the sole shareholders, both holding 500 shares in the corporation. Shauna will be the manager of record. The store will employ an electronic scan system whereby any purchased wine or malt beverage will require the entry of a 6-digit number corresponding to a birth date, and the computer will then permit or deny the sale of the item to the customer. This is a safety mechanism employed to avoid sale to underage minors. It encourages and requires asking for an ID for age-restricted products. The hours requested are Monday through Saturday, 8 a.m. to 11 p.m., and Sunday, noon to 11 p.m. I believe that the requested hours are consistent with the hours utilized by the prior licensee, Paul Avejanos. I welcome any questions, comments that the members of the board may have on the license transfer being requested.
Mr. Yu.
Can you tell me a little bit more about that identification process you mentioned?
Sure. If you don't mind, I can ask Chris to speak to it. He's got a ton of knowledge on it.
The system requires anytime we scan age-restricted products, whether it be tobacco products, cigarettes, beer or wine, upon scanning it, it prompts a 6-digit entry code that prompts the clerk to require an ID
Okay.
or enter a valid birthday code. Obviously, you read the ID and it's, if it's 12, 15, 80, it will allow the sale, saying that they're 30 or 31 years old or 30 years old. If the date is under that, it wouldn't allow the sale. It's a safety, basically a secondary catch, and it requires the clerk to always think about the ID on every transaction.
So when someone comes in, they're going to give you their identification, and you'll still have to make a judgment call? I mean, because they can...
You had still, obviously, standard procedure of looking at the ID, make sure that person's the same as that, as the ID represented in front of you. Standard practice, it's just a secondary fail-safe to remind the clerk every time to make that, do that check.
Does it not only read the numbers, is it able to identify forgery?
That's up to the clerks and the clerk's training, and, with the tips.
No, I understand that. I mean, you make that...
The ID itself,
But does the system, when you scan it, I mean, obviously, if someone gives you something with a barcode, for example, and let's say you try to return something you bought in Stop and Shop, and you go through BJ's and you scan it, well, it's not going to take the scan because
Right.
they're not going to identify that. So on the same parallel, if someone comes in with a forged license, for example, is the system that sophisticated where it might be able to identify this? This is not a legitimate document.
Yeah, I guess with the barcode, it's a two-step process really, that the clerk has to see the ID and identify it, as well as take the date scan on it. So the clerk would be responsible. If it's a valid scan, I guess then it's really up to the clerk and their training.
No, I understand that. I understand that. I'm just trying to identify if it identifies forged license license identification, that's all.
Now you have me confused. I thought what you were saying was that whenever you scan product
Right.
that
It requires a 6-digit
required
entry.
a valid ID,
Correct.
the
And
clerk
birthday
would
entry.
check the ID manually, type in the birthday on the ID,
Yes, that's.
and that's
right.
all.
The
That's
system,
it.
yeah,
The-
it can scan the ID, but it doesn't, that's really, I think, the next generation for the company. We enter it physically right now. I know we've had success in our store, at least, on the older generation licenses. We could scan and catch the ID, but those licenses aren't even valid anymore, those are all expired. So I think they eliminated that to eliminate the ID, the possibility of, maybe taping over a bad barcode or something along those lines. But we physically check the ID.
Yeah, so the
Okay.
value of this
Physically
is,
answer
the value of this is the transaction can't be completed without putting a birth date.
Correct.
in
A
Correct.
the
valid
system.
6-digit code.
Okay.
Thank you.
Mr. Vino?
Yes, will everybody who is working the register selling alcohol be tips trained?
We can do that, absolutely. We have somebody within our corporation that's actually certified tips trainer.
I guess my question is, will you be doing
Yes.
that? Okay,
That is a requirement, by the way.
yeah, that's a requirement.
In Hudson, all my full-time staffers are currently tip certified, and during the summer, we usually have the part-timers certified or recertified if they haven't come back. So it usually expires in 3 years, so some of my seasonal help comes back, and still has the certification valid.
Mhm.
Just so long as they're all certified, and valid, that's fine.
In the paperwork here, it said that the hours would be the same. What are the hours? It didn't say.
I
least I didn't
have
see
them
it.
as 8 AM to 11 PM, Monday through Saturday, and noon to 11 PM Sunday.
All right, thank you. Any other questions?
Yeah, just,
Mr. O'Leary.
as far as the current employees that are there, you're gonna stay on? You're gonna keep the people on, or?
I don't actually know the status of the current employees. Current employees are employed by TFS corporate. So I would assume that as long as they want to stay on and we interview them and go through the process, that I'd like to have some staff that's familiar with the neighborhood and with the regulars. I don't know who's there right now, actually.
But would you, this is all effectuated, you are gonna have the final say on who's there and who's not
Yes,
there?
yeah.
That sort of thing?
I'm responsible for staffing.
Okay. But your intention is to,
My intention is to say, I'm not sure this tension of whether TFS wants to move them to other stores. If they have employees they feel are valuable, corporate employees that they'd like to take to other stores, then I think that would be their choice, but.
So you wouldn't know that answer. You wouldn't know whether to interview them until their status is determined with did you say TFS?
The store is
sorry.
being run currently, Mr. Avejanos was a franchisee, much like Mr. Pendleton. His franchise ended, and he left the store. And so in the interim, Tedeschi Food Shops Corporation came in and ran the store corporately. And the staffing of the store then no longer becomes the responsibility of Mr. Avejanos, the outgoing franchisee. It becomes the responsibility of the franchisor in the interim to put a staff in there. So one point is, we don't really know whether the staff in there right now is the same staff that was employed by Mr. Avejanos. Two, when Mr. Pendleton, when and if he takes over, pending the outcome, then the corporate employees may be asked to go to a different corporate store to fill in for a transition, much like this one. But there's also the ability for Mr. Pendleton to say, hey, I've got a few employees here that are really great and understand the local scene, and I'd like to keep them. And I think it's been a fairly common occurrence for seasoned employees who understand the customer base to stick around for a new franchisee.
When I took over in Hudson, I kept the entire staff at that time on, and then, obviously through 8 years, some of them rolled off, but I actually still have 3 employees that started with me under the former franchisee.
in the